Storm Floris is on its way, and it's also forecast to start raining later today for the next couple of days. So I thought I'd do an update on the Paulownia, because sadly I'm expecting some damage to the Paulownia with their huge leaves. That said, I've actually found Paulownia to be quite wind resilient. Sure, a few of the leaves will get broken off, but generally speaking they should be fine. In general, all the Paulownia have done well this year. The dry, warm conditions have suited them. I'll say a bit more on the warm conditions shortly. This one's probably done about 1.5 meters of growth so far this year. Still a good month to 6 weeks anyway of good growth left in the season. It's also thickened up quite nicely in the stem. It's not huge yet, perhaps 120, 12 centimetres, 120 millimetres broad at the base. The newly planted Paulownia look much more likely to survive. My efforts with vegetation control to start with, I think, have paid dividends, though these are easily 3 times the size of those I planted last year. I've been going around and removing any basal shoots. Paulownia will definitely come out with basal shoots no matter when you plant them and no matter what stage of growth they're in. This will encourage them to grow one longer, taller stem. Even the Paulownia that are established now produce basal shoots. This is the one that I stooled, and it came out with several basal shoots, which I've removed as I've gone along. And I've also been removing any side shoots as they appear. So I'd say this one's probably 8 weeks from being stooled, perhaps 60, 70 centimetres tall. Hopefully that will get to 2 metres by the end of the season. The kiln drying log store is going to happen, however it's not going to happen in time for me to cut and chop up this firewood to dry it for the winter. But that's okay. I'm going to utilise this space in the polytunnel. Things are changing, moving away from growing trees in bulk, more towards growing food in quantities just to satisfy my own and perhaps a few other people's requirements. So I've removed all the racking and supports, and I'm in the process of removing this planking boarding that was used to retain the soil I'm using as raised bed. That was the initial plan, to have these as raised beds for growing food, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to grow food in containers. So once I've removed all of the planking and this rail on top and also these metal supports, then I'm going to extend the paving slabs all the way to the outer wall, and below that, before I put the slabs down or sand down, I'm going to put damp proof membrane in, and that's important because there are 3 factors which are important when it comes to drying firewood. One will be catered for by the kiln drying log store, and that is air circulation. Hot air will be blown down and circulated up through the logs, and they will be very dry. The other 2 are temperature, and it gets very warm in this polytunnel, and the other one is humidity. It's been quite interesting that in the green polytunnel up the back, which doesn't have a waterproof roof, this polycarbonate one does. As soon as the summer was finished and the temperature started to drop and the moisture started to seep in, logs that were stored in that green polytunnel up the back, and I'll link to that video in the description, those logs started to gain moisture content. This round of spruce, which has been drying both in the polytunnel, I think actually this was the original one that I weighed and measured in the green polytunnel last year. Initially it was 5.3 kilos, it now weighs 3.25 kilos, and weighing is my preferred method of gauging the moisture content of wood. However, what I would come on to here is it started to gain during the winter when it was stored by the kiln, by the wood burning stove. It actually got down to 3.2 kilos, and the moisture content at that time around the stove would have been perhaps 50, 60 percentage relative humidity. It's now 60, 70, and it's put on marginal 5 grams, 50 grams. So it's not a huge increase, 5 grams. So it's now 3.25 kilos. So it's actually 50 grams. So not an inconsiderable amount of moisture. Anyway, that kind of demonstrates that humidity is a big factor as well when it comes to drying out wood. You can dry out wood in the Arctic where it's freezing because the humidity is very low. Just for some reference here, this is eucalyptus, and on the 30th of January this weighed 1.2 kilos. Again, it's been dried out mostly in front of the wood burning stove. So 1.2 kilos at the end of January. So say it's now the end of July. It's actually the 2nd of August, but end of July, so that's January, February, March, April, May, June. So 6 months. In 6 months it's now 0.494 kilos. So it's lost 0.5 kilos, 0.7 kilos, more than 50% of its weight. So it's got to be at least less than 50% moisture content. Anyway, using this gauge, this prong style moisture content reader, the eucalyptus is reading 12. I'd say it's lower than that. It does depend on where you stick the prongs as well. Okay, so it's reading 18 there. I'd actually say it's about 10. It's interesting how much it's shrunk in the time it's been drying. The paper there was tight to the log when I first set this experiment up. And the spruce, okay, it's reading 10 if I stick it there. And closer to 12 when I stick it there. These are both dry. They're not kiln dried, but they're as close as can be to that. Just while I'm here, I saw one video which suggested that you can't tell if a log is dry by the fact that it splits. In my experience so far, and it is limited, I've only been doing this for a few years, when logs dry, especially if they are dried quickly, they split. Eucalyptus in particular will split if it's dried quickly, and that's a good thing because the more cracks it has in it, the faster it will dry out. Small error there, but I suspect the error is built into this tester. This tester has different modes, so A is for teak, walnut, hardwoods basically, of which eucalyptus is one. If you want a very accurate measure, then you need a very accurate tester that you can set for the different woods, be they hard or soft. So when I was testing the spruce there, I just had it on the hardwood setting. So if I change the mode to D, which is basswood, larch, pine, so spruce would be closer to that, and I'll retest it. It's now showing closer to 15 at that location. I stick the prongs in, and at the side likewise 14, so it's reading a higher moisture content, so a good indication. As I say, both of these are very dry. Temperatures are very factually above average, above the long-term average and the short-term average. I'll put a graph up on screen of the temperatures in my location here. These temperatures are taken from the Coolmean weather station, which is about 3 kilometres south of here, and it's on the crest of a hill. I'd expect temperatures there to be warmer than here, although the temperature sensors that I have are reading on average 1 to 2 degrees warmer than the official or professional weather station at Coolmean. I'd say that perhaps the location of my sensor, although it's in the shade, it's next to a building, and where it's now situated it doesn't get enough air circulation, so I'm not going to say that my local, very local temperature readings here from my sensors are accurate just yet, though I've started designing an enclosure that will give air circulation around the sensor, and it will also be white, so it will reflect any heat as well. So even withstanding all that, temperatures are definitely rising. So perhaps it's about time to deploy some fast growing capture carbon devices. Thanks for taking the time, always appreciated.